Like, I got wired.
Yeah.
Took it to a breaker.
I know a couple of people that did that.
Everybody's homes are getting retrofitted now.
We have
Castle Society.
electrical permits pulled.
My neighbor had a gigantic welder in the back
My
of his work
parents,
truck.
they're
He's like, Mom never let me generate a
Hours of people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 'cause that thing will be 220 to run a big old
I
dryer.
ran it home to my neighbor, gave them all the juice.
Yeah.
It was like magic. Yeah, so we had the transfer switch actually put in several years ago. But we realized so it's a four prong that goes into the wall. And then it's a four prong that should plug into the generator. But our generator takes three prongs. But we just use it as like, just a generator.
Can you get a converter?
Well,
Basically 30 amps, and there was 30 amps.
I had
Yeah.
my wife
So we
was
gotta,
doing it for service.
Luckily, they have producers and pretty easy to, because I have to do everything.
so
She's
now we're ready to
She's a
go.
little
Plug it on in.
woozy. It was early, the first thing this morning, like 7:45. She got done at 9:30 and she's been sleeping most of the day. But I left her with plenty of protein on Harrison Ford movie on the TV.
So she'll be okay.
It'll be fine.
Good evening and welcome to the Creswell City Council work session, January 29, 2024. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for coming tonight. We have a lot on the agenda tonight, so it's a good thing that I don't have a mayor's report, which was number one. So we go to number two, committee reports, and we start with administration and finance. Chair Castilla.
I have no report tonight, Mayor.
Public Safety Committee Chair Nick Smith.
We have no report tonight either, we have not met yet.
Chair of Transportation and Public Works Committee Shelley Clark.
I do have a very brief report in that the Water Rate Advisory Committee will be meeting on February 5th, which is next Monday, at 6:30, I believe in this room, so that we can live stream that meeting. We'll be talking about recommended water rates, what recommended sewer rates, and as well as the recommended TUF for the next year.
Great, thank you. Parks and Tree Advisory Board Chair Norma Osborne.
Believe it or not, we've had several meetings since we've had them.
Okay,
Basically, we're doing working on the same thing. We reviewed the tree list, and we kind of worked with looking at Eugene's tree list and made some changes in format and added a few trees, and I think it's going to work out a lot better. We worked on the signage for Garden Lake Park in all the meetings. It's still not ready to go. It's such a big file that we have to find somebody that can actually print the size and the size of the file. Pollinator garden still in progress. I don't know if they've gotten the water line in, but hopefully it'll be all planted by springtime. Of course, we selected a new secretary and a chair, which Riley Newman is again our chair, and Peter Osborne is our new secretary. Some of the birdhouses, or all the birdhouses, have been installed in the parks around town. I haven't gone to look at them yet. And we have just barely begun planning for Arbor Day, but we have things going on. It's going to be a great one. This might be the best one ever.
very good.
Oh, and we have a list of all the new plantings at the Creswell Clubhouse that was part of the grant that they received for the playground equipment. There's quite a few.
So this is the new what?
The Creswell Clubhouse.
Yes.
There were a lot of new plantings.
Oh, plantings.
Plantings.
Plantings, okay.
And that's pretty much it.
Okay, so you have before you in your packet. Go
For a
ahead.
question?
Yes? Stacy?
I actually have a couple.
Okay.
The tree list that you talk about, is that the list of approved trees?
Yes.
So considering last week, when you are picking approved trees, is consideration taken into how resilient they are for different various types of weather?
Not really.
Because one thing I noticed when I was driving in Springfield is the city trees there really suffered compared to a lot of other trees, and that made me wonder about how resilient the trees that were selected are.
Actually, if I could say something about that, I think if you look at Creswell Street trees versus some of the other trees around town, I think our trees fared pretty
I
well.
thought so.
But that's because of the maintenance they receive.
It is.
So, it's our crews going through and keeping them trimmed every year. And, just taking really good care
Okay.
of them. So I'm hopeful that our tree list, which has been looked over by Cliff and it will still be a good list.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just thought maybe we could take in a little bit of consideration the hardiness of the specific trees on the list, but it was just.
That's a
but-
great
But what you're
suggestion.
saying is definitely valid.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
If you look at the ones downtown.
I did notice the
great.
difference between our city trees and others, and well noted and appreciated. Thank you.
Good job.
Some of the criteria that to put a tree on the list is it going to be second story or lower? Is it going to interfere with the power lines? Is it going to interfere with underground? Does the root go down? Is it going to destroy a sidewalk?
Mhm.
There's a lot of considerations, but hardiness isn't. I think the trees that did better is the ones that were more flexible and could
I
flex.
agree with you.
The ones, like my maple lost a lot of branches because it didn't have that flexibility. And I don't know that you're gonna find a lot of trees that are hardy enough to stand up to windstorms and to ice storms and.
I mean, we've had them forever. I've never seen trees go like this. And so I get what you're saying. It
Yeah.
just was a question and something
Yeah,
I hope
that's
that we're
definitely
thinking about.
something to consider,
Yeah.
which we didn't, it wasn't one of the considerations when we put the list together.
And I'm not asking you to go back on it. I just.
No, but,
Curious.
I don't know that where to find that information anyway, how hardy the trees are.
Okay, you said you had several questions?
No, that was it.
Okay.
I had two, I think I had.
Okay, so we have the recommendations for naming South Second Street. So first I want to say thank you, Norma, and I was hoping some of your members of your committee would be here tonight, but maybe they're online. Thank you, Norma, and the Parks and Tree Board for great work. Counselors, do you have any questions for Norma about the process that was used? Or any comments from Norma, and then we'll just talk about this for a few minutes. Any questions for Norma about the process that they used?
I have copies, if you're gonna pass those around.
Of the blank form?
This is actually the information, the criteria that that was used we had to make sure that the names fit into this criteria.
Yeah, that's in the packet.
Is it in the packet?
Yeah.
I didn't pick up my packet today.
Oh, it's in the packet.
It's downstairs. But anyway, so we went over all the names that were submitted, and I think all but one of them, one of the names submitted fit into the criteria.
Okay, so council members, this is FYI if you're interested. Several of the names submitted have information in, if you haven't ever seen this before, the Blue Valley, which is the book written, it's the history of Creswell. And I know we have them at the Creswell Library. I don't know if we have any copies here, but they're at the library. And I want to give you a few page numbers if you're interested in doing a little more research on some of the ones submitted. So, I just went through in order. For the Alvin Hughes and James Robinette names in this book, page 86 to 88, go into pretty extensive information about how they both gave 5 acres and which formed the downtown area. And one gave north of Oregon, one gave south of Oregon with the agreement Oregon Avenue was going to be that center strip. So page 86 to 88, plus page 86 is interesting because it tells the history about the Holts, of which we named Holt Park after. So that's a little interesting information. And then Calapooya, if you look on page 1 in this book, it tells about the Calapooya, but it's spelled differently. It's spelled Kalapouya, and there's 3 pages in here, page 1, 2, and 3, on the Calapooya Native Americans and their beginnings here in Creswell. So that was interesting reading. And I think there was one other, Dwayne Hodges. If you go over to the memorial right here, you'll find the military memorial here. There's a plaque dedicated to Dwayne Hodges that tells about him. And then there was one other, I think, that had information in here. Maybe I already covered it. I think that was it, just some of the historical information. So, council members, we have all this information. Are we ready to take it to a vote at the February council meeting, or where do you want to go with it?
First of all, I want to know what the correct way to spell Robinette is. Because
Well-
I believe that his name, if we're gonna honor the man, I believe it does not end in an E.
So here it is spelled Robinettete.
It
And
is.
then, interestingly enough, sometimes over the years, there's a note on page 89, sometime over the years, the spelling changed to Robinette, Robinett.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
So,
It was originally had an E on the end.
so there you
No,
go.
originally,
It originally had an
did,
E.
yeah.
They're both right.
And then it
This
just
one's
notes that
makes better
sometimes
sense,
it was
but,
changed.
okay.
So, and if you've never read this book, it's a ton of fun.
Do you know the way it was spelled when it was handed over to Creswell?
Well, actually, in this book, it's very interesting. Page 87 of the book actually has the platting from the Lane County records, and it tells about it. And it says, on this first day of November, 1871, we, James Robinette, with an E on the end,
Okay.
and Alvin Hughes do acknowledge and declare that we have laid out the town of Creswell with 2 S's.
Good sleuthing. Thank you.
Cresswell, 2 S's.
I'm so glad they didn't keep that.
So, and there's all the platting out there, and then there's a seal, and it's signed, and they paid,
Not enough?
where does it say? I thought I'd read how much they paid, but now I don't see it right offhand. So anyways,
Thank you.
wonderful book.
Yeah.
Other questions about where do we want to go next? Are we ready to go to a vote in 2 weeks? The city council, as you read in here, has the final authority to select the name. Michelle?
Also, you don't have to use these names. As city council, you can decide a name that's not on the list. So I just want to make sure you have that option as well.
Sure. Yep.
I don't know, I know they sell those books at the museum, but I don't know when they're ever going to be open again to pick up one, to research it. Do you think they might have one at the library?
I know the library has copy or copies.
Okay.
You might be able to get in touch with some of the people there at the Historical Society. They might be able to help you.
Okay.
Suzanne Peterson is a good name to contact, and she's in here. And Debbie Heisley, those are 2 names in here that filed, and both of them are part of Creswell Historical Society in Creswell.
I was thinking Monica Knight.
Monica Knight, she's another one, she's in here too, yep. So yes, Shelley?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder if we can get a scanned copy of the book, so even just the pages that that talk about, these individuals or talk about the names. So it's not the whole book, but we might be able to do that so that we can at least kind of read that and I'll be able to review that information.
Yes, members?
I'd be willing to try and get in touch with Monica tomorrow and see if we can't get a copy for City Hall. Because I think we should have a copy. And then I can get the page numbers from you and I can email them out.
That'd be great.
If that's what you'd like.
If you can get hold of her, I would like a copy, and I'll write a check for.
Yeah,
both things.
same, I would also.
I'd take a whole book, I'll pay for that too.
Submit an order.
Just get 7 copies.
Thank you.
I think it's like $20-some.
You should probably make commission off of this one.
So, on the information on Ron Hansen, there was one other interesting note. It's in here that he was first hired as city recorder when the city had no city administrator. Then he became the first city administrator. Then after he retired, all those years later, at some point in time in the 2000s, he was elected city councilor. So he came back and served again in that role. So that was an interesting side note, yeah.
He started as a city councilor.
And I didn't know that. So, okay, so we'll get some copies. Do you want to take it to a discussion vote in 2 weeks? Do you have enough information? I'm just looking for your input. Where do we want to go next?
Well, my first question is, so what's the voting process gonna look like? Are we sticking with the short list, or are we gonna look at all these other names?
That's up to the council to decide. Do you want to vote on the 4 names recommended? Do you want to vote on all that were here? And any others you come up with?
If you really love it, you could leave at 2nd Street Park.
Do we want to take time tonight to discuss this? We're not going to vote tonight.
I'm happy with the short list that we have. I can decide from that.
Okay?
I'd like more
Clark?
information.
I think these are 4 excellent things, and I'm already having a tough time going between these 4, so it's nice to have a focus like this.
Okay? Let's just go around, everybody weigh in. Nicholas, you've weighed in?
Yes, sir.
Norma Jean, weigh in?
I am fine if we go just off of the 4 that we've chosen. We couldn't narrow it down to 3, but the 4 that we've chosen. But I would like to have the time to research, look at the book, read, and understand more. I mean, it even could be, what's his name, Robinette, 2nd Street Park. I don't, Yeah, I don't think I'm ready to have done my research and be ready to vote on it in 2 weeks. Because I don't know how soon we'll get the book to look at.
Okay? Clark?
Well, I did speak, but I do have something else. You didn't mention Mr. Hansen in the book. Is he not in that specific book, or?
Well, I didn't go through this with a fine-tooth comb
Okay.
today. I knew that there was information on Robinette and Hughes, and I knew there was information on Calapooya, so I specifically looked there. I wouldn't doubt if he's in here, but probably he is, honestly, but.
If he's not, I believe the Register Guard archives are still on Google newspapers, like buried deep in Google, and there might be some news articles back when, Register Guard was more of a county newspaper rather than whatever it is now.
So, anything further, Clark?
No, that is all, thank you.
Okay, let's just go around and then we'll come back to the manager.
I just wanted to comment that the Chronicle has a complete history of Creswell, and that's where I went to do my research.
Okay, good. Stacy?
When this first came about, I did a lot of reading and stuff, and before we even got the short list, I was very settled that I feel like we should honor the founders. I don't think that Creswell has honored the founders in any way, naming a park after them or anything, have they? Yeah. And I think that I am very strongly leaning towards honoring the founders of Creswell. So I like Robinette. Who did you say the other guy's
Hughes.
name? It is Hughes. I keep getting it messed up. I'd almost prefer a hyphenated, like Robinette Hughes Park or Hughes Robinette. I think that we should honor them both.
Whichever sounds better.
Okay, Shelley?
I mean, I would like to do a little bit more research and look at the information, so it might make sense for us to add this to our February work session for more discussion, and then maybe move it forward to a vote in March.
Okay,
Yes, I would love to take a little time and do a little fact checking for myself. And yes, I totally agree with honoring some sort of founders of Creswell. And I totally would love to stick with the names that were submitted by our citizens. I wouldn't want to just say, oh, we're going to name it whatever we want to name it. I would like to stick with what the citizens have submitted, so.
so I'm hearing some sentiment towards a little longer time to where you can do the research. I'm hearing some that are settled on 4, and some that think maybe in 2 weeks we're ready to decide. So, council members, let's just ask this way. Do you want this on the docket in 2 weeks for February 12th?
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes?
No.
I'd like to take a little bit more time. I don't think we're in a big rush to name the park. Second Street will do fine for a little bit longer.
Are we in a rush?
No.
Okay, then I would be happy that we wait a couple more weeks as well,
Yeah.
to give everybody a chance to do a little more reading, a little more thinking. But at the February work session, we'll have a discussion of this. Let's remember that February we're doing our ALICE training, so that's already shaping up to be a long meeting. So do your reading and homework. Come prepared either to talk about it more or say, I've done my reading, let's get it on for March. And also come prepared to say, I want to go with the 4 names, or I want to keep it open at March to where any name that we have can come up. Okay? We'll tackle again in March. Thank you for all your work.
We have this list of names. Should we consider naming something else in the future that?
We can consider that, but we're not going to consider that tonight.
No, we don't have to, but
Yeah.
it could be.
We have a naming policy, which means that any time, any counselor or citizen could come to the city with a suggestion to name something. So it could happen at any time.
Right.
Okay, so let's go on to the Airport Commission meeting. Airport Commission report.
No report tonight, but I will say that the regular Airport Commission meeting was pushed out due to the ice storm. So we'll be meeting January 31st, and then you'll get a lengthy report in for the February work session to complete the charge, and there'll be a lengthy report at that time.
Okay, I'm on next LCOG, and I have no report tonight. Lane Act, Shelley?
I do have a report.
Okay.
So Lane Act met in January. I was actually not able to be at their January meeting, but a couple of highlights from there is that we did elect our officers for Lane Act, and so I was elected chair of Lane Act for the next year. So thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So Creswell and our rural communities will be very present within that steering committee for Lane Act. And then Mayor Keith Weiss, who is the mayor of Veneta, was elected vice chair for Lane Act. So again, our rural communities are going to be well represented. And then Rob Zako from the Better Eugene Springfield Transportation was elected as the ambassador to the Oregon Transportation Commission. So, and he is kind of continuing in that leadership role for this next year. So that is very exciting. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to our previous chair, Shelley Humble, who we're tag teaming out. Manager Humble served as our chair for the last 2 years for Lane Act, and so and has just led with grace and just passion and just she was amazing. And so I've got some big shoes to fill as we transition or make this transition. So very excited about that. The other thing that happened is that we talked about our 2024-25 work plan. And so that moved forward. And then there was also some equity guidance from ODOT for advisory committee members. And because, like I said, I wasn't there, so I'm not able to speak to exactly what was talked about if you'd like more information about that. The other thing that ODOT was able to provide an update for is last time I gave an update about what was going on with Lane Act is that we talked about how there was some budget shortfalls, and so there were going to be some things that like maintenance and kind of like road clearing, ice road, ice, all that sort of stuff that was going to be difficult. There was some money for an agreement from the governor, so there was $19 million that was able to be found. So they were able to continue doing maintenance, planned maintenance, as well as be able to maintain facilities and trucks and all that sort of stuff. So that is good, especially in reflection over what, the weather that came in just recently. So I wanted to share that information. Our next meeting is coming up on February 14th. So what a great way to both celebrate Oregon's birthday is also, to attend a Lane Act meeting. So if you are interested, let me give you a couple of highlights to help sweeten the deal if you are interested in attending, and in particular for our rural communities. So there's going to be 2 grant overviews, and there again, both grants are actually really focused on rural communities and being able to bring in money for rural communities. So the first one is the Great Streets 2.0 grant program, which I believe actually extends beyond just like ODOT roads. So if we wanted to provide, or if we wanted to put in a grant funding for maybe some of our roads, this might be an opportunity for us to do that. We're also going to hear about the ODOT carbon reduction program for, again, specifically for our rural communities. So if you are interested in seeing how we can get some of those sweet, sweet grant dollars to be able to come into our community, this would be a really good meeting for you to attend. And so I know that I'll be there. I assume other folks from Creswell will be there as well, but I would invite you all, if you're interested in getting more information, I would invite Manager Amber to be there if she is interested, right? I would invite us all to be there to learn more about that, because I think that could be really big for Creswell and could be really important. So you look like you have a question.
This will be in person?
So, yeah.
That was the question.
Oh my gosh, it was like you knew what I was going to talk about. So we had been kind of going back and forth between do we meet in person, do we meet hybrid, do we meet online? And what we found is that we have much greater attendance and much greater participation if we're online. So we're going to move, instead of monthly meeting in person, we're going to meet quarterly in person. So in that way we can all get together and be around the table together, but also honor if someone is going to be away, they can still participate in that meeting, or from the comfort of their home or their office or wherever internet works well. So we're able to, like I said, just increase participation. So if you would like the link, I will happily share that once I have it, if you would like to attend.
I'm not good with online meetings. I'm more comfortable with in-person meetings, that's why I asked.
Yeah, okay, that's understandable.
Do you know how much these grants are for?
I do not remember off the top of my head, but I will
I'm thinking
send you that.
Highway 99. Is
Yeah.
it big enough for some of those improvements?
I think that we should always ask.
We agree there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm even thinking of the frontage along 99 that's so bad, and maybe paving from where they stop paving all the way at least up to the intersection.
Yep.
Maybe those would be a good thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but again, 2 grant opportunities that are really specifically focused towards rural communities. So that is fantastic. The last time we had the Great Streets grant proposal, it was a $50 million pot of money. And even before we started, $15 million was already allocated for a project up in Portland. And so that made it that much more competitive for all of us. So that is coming up, very exciting. And then we're also going to hear more about the Connect Oregon grants as well in our February meeting. And so that is my Lane Act update for today.
Thank you. So, question, is Shelley still on the commission?
I am an other stakeholder for aviation.
Okay,
So
good.
I cover aviation for Lane County.
Very good. You're right, Shelley, you've been an amazing advocate for Creswell. So thank you. Okay, well, tonight we have our attorney, Mr. Ross Williamson here, to present us with our annual training. And this year we're adding to our training a section on harassment policy, which is new, but we felt that that was something we needed to cover this year. So take it away and welcome, Ross.
Thank you very much.
Why did we add it?
Well, the city in 2020 adopted a harassment policy in the employee handbook, but many of us are new since that time, and we and the city council, while they worked through it, other than Alonzo and maybe Shelley, none of the rest of us were here. So we felt that was an important component that we needed to cover this year.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yes, so I took requests for the subjects of tonight's training, so it's very full. So I will do my best to plow through and get through it. But as always, please ask questions if you have any. My name is Ross Williamson. I've been city attorney for Creswell probably since 2010-ish, around there or so, and I've worked with Creswell since a little before that. I work at the Local Government Law Group, which is a law firm in Eugene that only works with small cities and other small government entities. And I have, we have 7 attorneys there, and that's all we do. And so I'm able to, other attorneys in my office work with you all and work with your staff, because we have a broad range of expertise. And so we have, for instance, we have one attorney, Armand, who does a lot of franchise work, and so he works closely with Jim and Michelle on your franchises. So that is just a little background on me. And then, so for tonight, we are going to talk a little bit about mandatory reporting. This is now the 3rd year where I've brought up mandatory reporting, but I'm going to add a little bit to the work, to the slides on that issue. I'm going to talk a little bit about workplace harassment, as the mayor mentioned. There is some new public meeting law to talk about tonight, so I'm going to update you on that. We're going to talk a little bit about public records, just foreshadow for you the same usual speech on public records. It's all public records. And then we're going to talk about ethics. So let's get right into it. Mandatory reporting. So effective January 1 of 2022, all local elected officials, you all, are now mandatory reporting. So you have to think about child abuse, elder abuse, and vulnerable person abuse, vulnerable adult abuse. And that vulnerable adult is generally someone who's in a care home or otherwise reliant on other people for their care. This is probably the most important slide in this part of the talk, and it's just the phone number. So if you think you have to report, or there's a question about whether you have to report or not, this is the DHS phone number. It's staffed 24/7 by people who know how to report and can answer those questions and can walk you through that process. And so they're skilled folks who can take your call. All right, so what is child abuse? Child abuse is the non-accidental physical or mental injury to a child that endangers their safety and welfare. So that is the statutory definition of child abuse. And so what are some examples? I think you have the very basic physical abuse. A child has a broken arm, has a big bruise that they can't explain. That would be child abuse. And neglect is also child abuse, so failing to provide the adequate essentials, so food, shelter, failing to provide those to a child is abuse. Sexual abuse, of course, may not be physical harm, but if it's sexual in nature, then it can be child abuse. Psychological damage, constantly berating a child over and over and inflicting psychological damage, that is child abuse. And also exposing children to controlled substances. So a child often in a drug house, so to speak, can be subject to child abuse if they are around that drug abuse all the time.
Does that include smoking marijuana? If
Well-
the child's parent uses marijuana and that child is around them, does that count?
So in Oregon, no, because marijuana is not a controlled substance in Oregon.
Oh.
So it's not illegal.
I'm gonna say, because you can drink around your kids, right?
Yeah.
So it's be under that same category, right?
Yeah. So reasonable discipline is not abuse. Of course, reasonable is one of those legalese words that has a lot of gray area. But generally, if you see a parent disciplining their child, that is not abuse. And so with most of these subjects today, I guess I'll say, I'm not going super in depth. And so my usual MO for you all is to try to touch on the subjects, to give you a basic understanding so you know when to ask questions. And so that's what I'm trying to do, especially with this child abuse and with the harassment we'll talk about later. It's just not, you can go to a whole training on child abuse and elder abuse. This is not that. And so I'm just trying to introduce the subject for you, let you know your obligations, and then we can always talk when things come up. So elder abuse. An elder is someone 65 and older. And you can abuse an elder in different ways than a child. So it's all those physical issues that we talked about with child abuse. Those would also be elder abuse. If you are hitting someone 65 and older, that is elder abuse. But it's also financial issues. So financial exploitation. Elder abuse also often comes up in trust and estate matters. That's where attorneys often see it, is when one side of the family is trying to get grandma's will changed and there's some coercion or something like that. That can be elder abuse. If you abandon an elder who needs assistance, if you shut them up, shut them in their house and don't provide any assistance, that could be elder abuse. Involuntary seclusion, physical or chemical restraints, oftentimes over-medicating can be elder abuse.
You made a comment about someone 65 or older, so is there a date or an age cutoff for elder abuse, or?
Cutoff?
Like, I mean, not cutoff, but.
A floor?
Is there a
65.
floor? There is.
65
Okay.
and above is an elder.
Is considered elder?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. I just wasn't
But
aware
there's
of that.
nothing for handicapped people of any age that are vulnerable to same issues that elders are.
Yep, you're cheating, that's the next slide.
Oh. Okay. Sorry.
No, that's a great question, yeah. So a vulnerable adult, and we might as well just flip to that. So
Okay.
a vulnerable adult is any age,
Right.
18 above, to be an adult. But if they are, generally it's someone in a care home or otherwise dependent on family or adults to care for them. So a vulnerable adult abuse is basically the same as elder abuse, but for a broader range of ages. It's more based upon the condition of the adult. So if they require care, then they're a vulnerable adult. So mandatory reporting talks about reporting. So make a report when you have reasonable cause to believe a child or adult has been abused. Reasonable cause to believe that a person you came into contact with has abused the child. So it's not only coming into contact with the person who has been abused, but also the abuser. So if someone comes up to you and say, hey, I just smacked my kid around a lot, but you didn't see the kid, but you just now have information that someone maybe has committed abuse. And believe means knowing or suspecting, and that is if you have more than just a hunch. So no, believing means more than just a hunch, together with some type of evidence. It can be visual evidence, it can be what we lawyers would call hearsay evidence. So if you hear about it, that could be evidence. But there's those two kind of things: reasonable belief, more than just suspicion, together with some evidence. It can be just you can obviously, if you see it, that's evidence. But if you hear about it, or it's documented somewhere, or if you see a picture of it, well, I didn't know Timmy had a big bruise on the side of his head that day. How'd that happen? And you get a bad explanation, that can be the evidence. Your duty to report is not tied to your position. So you, as city councilors and as the mayor, you are mandatory reporters, but you don't only have to mandatory report if you see something in this room. So once you become a mandatory reporter, once you become an elected official, it's a 24/7, 365 obligation. And if you do make a report, so if you say you see some abuse or hear about some abuse, you have more than just a hunch, and you have some evidence to support that some abuse took place, and you make that call, you are civilly and criminally immune if that was good faith call. So if you're not being vindictive, you don't want to call on your neighbor if you have no cause. But if you have some cause, if you believe that someone is being abused next door, then you're immune. You can request for confidentiality, but they will tell you that they cannot always honor that. Sometimes these cases go to trial, and then you might need to be a witness. So they will try to keep your name confidential to the extent they can, but they will call you in as a witness if they have to. And there's also, the law protects you from retaliation. So if you call a report on your neighbor can't retaliate against you for that action. So there is some protection there. You can claim retaliation if that neighbor then decides to tear down the fence or lob eggs over the fence, or whatever it might be. Retaliate against you for making that report. Yes.
So quick question about reporting. So let's say you see something that a reasonable person says there's some sort of abuse that is happening in the home. And maybe the person says, yes, abuse is happening in my home, right? And then an hour later, Lane County Sheriff Office shows up, right, for that report. Do you have an obligation to make a secondary report on that? Or is it reasonable to say a report has been made and my obligations are met?
That's a great question. So the mandatory reporting obligation is on you and only is extinguished by you making a report. And part of the reason for that is that DHS, when they take a call, they have a big database. And so they're adding data points to that database. And so maybe the first call about a child doesn't flag for them the investigation, but maybe the second or the third report would. And so they want everyone to report. Good question. And you may have seen something different that the police didn't see. And so you can add to that. So it's important. And I have heard DHS say their kind of tagline for some of their training is, when in doubt, report. So if you have some knowledge of abuse, but you're not sure if it rises to the level, you don't know where it is on that gray scale of reasonableness, they want to find out. All right. Next subject. Harassment. So here we're gonna, this is not a comprehensive training on harassment. I'm gonna introduce the subject to you and try to describe, why are we talking about this employment policy with the council. So I'm gonna explain that a little bit. We're gonna talk a little bit about the city policy, and then we're gonna talk about different forms of harassment and how you might be able to prevent that in your role as city council. So those of you who have seen my talk before, I've talked a little bit about the city councilor as a supervisor. And so in your city charter, section 33 creates the position of city manager and says that this person is appointed by the mayor with the consent of the council. And so you have, your city manager is your employee, and you supervise your city manager. You go through an annual performance review process, and so you have an employee, a paid city employee, who you supervise. The charter delegates operational powers to the city manager. The city manager then supervises all the other staff. So you don't supervise all the other staff, you supervise the city manager. But that is a role, that is an employment role. So even though you are not employees, you have a supervisory relationship with an employee. And so you are brought into this process through your role with your city manager. So you have supervisory obligations, and in that, an employment lawyer would say you have the obligation not to harass your employee, and also to help protect the entire workplace from harassment. So, the city has a policy, an anti-harassment policy, and this is required by state law. Every entity in Oregon is required to have an anti-harassment policy. It's supposed to meet certain elements, and we have one here at Creswell that meets those elements.
Is that the one that was put in place in 2020?
It would have been pretty recently. I'm not exactly sure.
So there was no requirement to have one before that with the state?
There was no statutory requirement.
Okay.
I think any employment lawyer would have told you
Right.
you should have one.
Right.
Yeah, but there was no mandate.
Okay.
Yeah. The policy is required to describe harassment and sexual harassment. It's required to describe a reporting and investigation process. So the Creswell policy describes how you report and what happens when a report is made. And it also is required to state that persons who report harassment are protected from retaliation. So we can't go after someone who reports, if I'm reported for harassment, I can't then go after them for making that report. So again, very high level, very high level on what is harassment. Harassment is any unwelcome communication or physical contact because of a protected class. And in Oregon, our protected classes are religion, race, color, national origin, sex, pregnancy, age, disability, marital status, or other legally protected status. So unwelcome communication or physical contact because of a protected class which unreasonably interferes with that person's work performance or which creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So, and harassment is a form of employment discrimination that violates state law and federal law. So if we have an employee that is harassing other employees in this nature, that is both a state problem and a federal problem.
Can we go back to that?
Yep.
The first paragraph, the way I'm reading that, so does it have to be tied to one of those things to be considered harassment?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want to ask, how to think about it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Yeah, good clarifier. And so my examples here build upon that. So it's unwelcome sexual advantage. So harassment, different types. This is examples of harassment. So unwelcome sexual advances that affect an individual's employment unreasonably interferes with their work performance or creates a hostile work environment. And so that sexual advances is based upon the sex of the person harassing and the person receiving the harassment, which is a protected class. Making derogatory age-related comments. So if you have someone that is 40 years or older and they're being berated for being too slow. Boy, I wish if you could just walk faster, we could get done sooner. Well, that's because you're harassing me because of my age. And it's not just verbal, and it's not just physical. It's also maybe you leave out an offensive cartoon that you know your coworker is going to see, and it's derogatory towards that person's religion. And religion is a protected class, and I'm not saying it or speaking it, but I'm leaving this cartoon out in the workplace, and that can be harassment. All right, so what do we do about harassment in the workplace? Well, we try to prevent it. And for you all, as policymakers and policy leaders for the city, I would say anti-harassment starts at the top. And so if you all treat your employee with respect, treat each other with respect, you lead by example. And I think that is the first step in preventing a hostile work environment, is by leading by example. I think you also have the benefit of being around staff. Sometimes you go in and out of City Hall and you interact with staff and you see what's going on. You are often a bystander. So harassment is most often signaled by a bystander, not one of the parties. The person getting harassed is often fearful. The person harassing obviously is not going to report themselves. So it's those around them that are the reporters. And so you're a bystander. And so you can pick up on some of these things, and you can see, and you can make those reports under the policy.
So this is different than mandatory reporting. Who would we, as a council, report harassment to? To Manager Amberg?
Yes, in the policy sets out who you report to, but most often, as a counselor, you would report to Michelle. Yeah. I would say.
We don't call DHS for that.
Right. No.
Okay.
This is new subject.
New subject.
Yeah. I will say, part of leading from the top is showing to the rest of the employees that this is important. And I think you're doing that by having me here to talk about this subject. But again, I'm skimming the, the very top of this, and there's a lot to talk about in terms of harassment, and there is specific trainings available for bystander training. So what do you do when you come across harassment, and how do you handle that as a colleague in City Hall? And so you all could decide to dedicate some more time to this subject. And I think one of the biggest bullet points that I've pulled from trainings that I've been to and been involved in is this last one. If you see harassment in the workplace, if you see harassment at City Hall, you don't want to confront or escalate. You don't want to challenge the person who's being harassed. That's just going to escalate things. But you can try to disrupt. It's the old deflect, try to, and the example here of, if you see someone telling a joke, a religious joke about someone's religion, that is probably harassment. You can identify that as, well, that's not really appropriate for our workplace. That wasn't funny. Rather than just jumping into the middle of the thing and stop harassing. Well, let's try to deflect it, settle the condition right there, and then think about talking to Michelle about, did that cross the line?
I would kind of argue that sometimes the bystander doesn't know what's going on. Sometimes maybe the two people standing there talking are telling off-color jokes to each other, and that's what they do, right? And so I think that, it's not always harassment, is it? I mean, like if the person receiving is standing there talking to someone and the other person's telling them a joke that's about religion, the person that is receiving that joke about religion, isn't it up to them to determine whether or not they're being harassed?
Well, so yes and no.
Well, I mean, we're all adults, I would think yes, but maybe somebody else is offended by it in the room. I get that piece of it.
Right. So,
Okay.
Right. So it's like the cartoon example. If that cartoon is seen by maybe not the intended target of the cartoon, but it's in the workplace, and now all of a sudden I came across that, or maybe I came across two employees having that conversation you're talking about, and now I'm like, oh gosh, these two people don't respect my religion, and now I'm offended. I feel like this is a hostile work environment towards my religion, and so even if those two were fully consenting in that conversation, it can have an impact that's broader.
Where does the employee go to report harassment if they are receiving harassment from the one that they would report it to?
Yeah, so usually you go to your supervisor, but if your supervisor is the offending party, then you go up the chain of command. Yeah, so if someone in Public Works, sorry Cliff, but it's just this purely an example. One of Cliff's subordinates feels offended by something Cliff's an off-color joke. That person would probably go to Michelle.
And if the employee felt, Michelle's the top of the chain, if the employee felt that the harassment was coming from the top of the chain, Michelle, that's just example, where would they go?
They can come to me. They can also go to BOLI, the state.
Or they can hire their own attorney, which is typically what happens.
Not that you were harassing anyone, I'm just curious, where do you go?
Yeah, so the city's policy is a good one, and it follows the model. And in that policy, it says you have a right to go to BOLI for complaints.
Okay, thank you.
And because it's an employee policy, the employees all get it when they are hired, so they know the policy and they know what they need to do.
It's in our employee handbook.
Do
Do you have any guidance around harassment that may not, and it may not be defined as harassment, but let's say that there's a member of our community who is emailing one of the city councilors or an employee of the city that is, I mean, they may not be attacking anyone or emailing about anything about a protected status, but they are sending repeated emails, for example, that spread untruths, that could create a volume of workload to be able to do research on their claims, things like that. Is there any guidance that you might have about that?
Yeah, a little bit. No silver bullet, unfortunately. And sometimes, confronting, the first step, I think, in confronting misinformation is with the right information. And of course, someone who's spreading misinformation doesn't often accept that. But that is the first step. And so if this person is spreading misinformation, we can counter that by spreading the right information. We can also, just by hypothetical, we could have a city manager that then spreads not only the right information, but how we've reviewed the allegations, the misinformation, and these are the reasons why it is a misinformation, and here's the correct information, and here's what we're going to be doing in the future on these issues. And so you try to spread as much positivity in terms of handling the allegations as possible.
And were you asking if it was specifically a form of harassment that they are doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. Like, is that a form of harassment, even if it's not under one of the protected statuses? Or is it something else?
It's something else.
Because it's their right, I think, is what it boils down to. I mean, at the end of the day, they have a right to be heard, whether we like what they're saying or not.
Yes and no. So they have a right to speak the truth.
Well, but who determines what that truth is? If they're
Sometimes the
making-
facts do.
Sometimes the facts do, but
Yeah.
sometimes the facts don't.
Sure.
And so, okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting, okay.
New subject. Switching gears. Public meetings. So this is the first year in a while that I've got to talk about something new for public meetings. But you will find that it's actually maybe not too new. In this last legislative session, the House passed, or the legislature and the governor signed House Bill 2805, and it made some new definitions in our public meetings law, and it also created a new grievance process for the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. So we're going to talk about those. So in the statute, a meeting has been defined as the convening of a governing body, of a public body, the city, for which a quorum is required in order to make a decision or deliberate towards a decision on any matter. And those two highlighted terms were undefined before 2003, and now they are defined. So the term convening is now defined as the gathering in a physical location, what we have right here. So this is convening. This is the convening of the council. Using electronic video or telephonic technology to communicate. So Zoom is a convening. Using serial electronic written communication among participants. We've talked about this before, but a reply all, and having that conversation via email or Instagram or Facebook. So if you were having contemporaneous electronic conversations, that is the serial electronic communication. That is now officially, I told you that was a meeting before. Now we have the statute saying, yes, that is convening. And then also using an intermediary to communicate. And this is also something that we've talked about. This is my example of when you take someone else's opinion and you put it in your back pocket, and then you go talk to another counselor and you bring out that opinion. If you do that twice, that you've created a quorum. So that's the intermediary problem.
So intermediary, you go and you talk to someone who's not on the city council, and you encourage them to go to talk to a city councilor and convey what you're thinking.
Yeah,
Is that also using an intermediary?
Sure, the intermediary does not need to be on the council.
Okay, that was my question.
Yep. So now officially, these are convening. So that intermediary problem that we've talked about before is now officially in the statute, convening a public meeting. So that is part of, now officially a problem. The term deliberation is now defined. And so deliberation is a discussion or communication that is part of a decision-making process. And that note is just me being picky. Note that the definition of meeting uses the term deliberate, but then they define the term deliberation. So I don't think that's going to be a problem, but that's just the legislature being a little sloppy, I think. We also have some express exclusions. And so we've talked about these too in prior trainings. What is excluded from being a meeting? Purely factual or educational communications in nature that convey no deliberation or decision on any matter that might reasonably come before the governing body. And so this is kind of the classic, maybe you're going to an LOC training session, and a quorum of the council is there, and you're learning about something from the LOC. That is not necessarily a meeting, as long as it's purely factual and it's not going to come before you. We can do. I always caution with this, but you could have a training about how to communicate with each other. Sometimes councils have a hard time communicating, and so you want to get into the nitty-gritty on communication styles, and you want to say whether I'm a type A or or what have you, and so you have those types of training sessions. As long as you're not talking at all about city business, that could be not a meeting. So you could hire a consultant to come in here and talk about communication styles. The caution I always give with that is it is so easy to stray with those types of trainings because someone will raise a well-meaning question will come up and say, well, last week we were talking about this and I was expressing it this way. Is that wrong? Well, now we might be talking about city business in that example and that question. So it's so easy to trip yourself up. So even though this is now in the statute, I still caution, we really need to be careful about this. Another express exclusion is if you have discussions not related to any matter that at any time could reasonably foreseen to come before the governing body for deliberation decisions. This is a lawyer's way of saying socialization. So if you are at a barbecue and you're talking about the mayor's family, and a quorum is standing around the mayor talking about his family, that is not a meeting because his family is never going to be a matter of city business.
So just remember that.
Well, let's hope so. I guess I should never say never, right? And then we've talked about this one too. The last now statutory exclusion from a meeting is non-substantive in nature, such as communicating relating to scheduling, leaves of absence, and similar things. And so we've talked about this where Michelle sends out the email saying, hey, we have to change our meeting date. We can't do it on Tuesday. Is everyone okay with Wednesday? And then everyone starts chiming in about Wednesday, and and what time on Wednesday. And we've got a quorum of people talking about Wednesday at 7 versus Wednesday at 5. That is not a meeting, because you're just talking about a purely administrative matter. So this is, the House Bill 2805 requires that you all receive training on public meetings now. And so you are now required to attend an in-person or a virtual public meeting training provided by or approved by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. And they are working on a curriculum. It has not been produced yet. And we have no idea who they're going to authorize to give that training. I don't know if I'm qualified yet. I suspect what they're going to do is they're going to put it up on their website, and you're going to have to spend 45 minutes, an hour of your time watching some video about public meetings and rehearing everything I've talked to you about for the last how many years, I don't know. So,
Will they make us pay for this?
I don't know.
So
Hopefully not.
They don't do anything that they're not generating revenue,
Right.
so.
Well, they received some funding for this. I think they got an extra 5 FTE for this legislation. So they did get some more funding. The training is required once per term. So for the mayor, that means once every 2 years. For the rest of you, that means once every 4 years.
And this isn't available yet, but it is required to get done.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Getting right on it. I'll get right on it too.
I'm on it
Okay,
tonight.
all right.
Yeah,
So,
they're working hard on it.
so the year, when this comes into place, so the years that when we do this, and we're required to do it, and we meet that requirement, will we still have to hear it again from you? Not that we enjoy it.
Like the harassment, we just went through that big old harassment training module that took me
I don't want to lose, I don't want to lose a second time hearing it, so I'm concerned that I may lose another round of this.
No, I guess if you don't want to know too much. Yeah, so I mean, right now, my trainings wouldn't count. So today, you're hearing about it, and sometime during your term, I don't know if you're on you have 2 years left or 4 years left?
3.
Or 3, yeah, so sometime in the next 3 years, you'll have to do it through them.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And we can cut this off and spend some more time doing something else for
Right.
our training here. All right, another new element of this legislation is that we now have, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission now has oversight over all public meetings issues. So before, they only had oversight on executive session problems. And so if someone thought that the city of Creswell was violating the ethics commission or the executive session provisions, they could file a complaint and the ethics commission would review that. If you file a complaint about how we're holding a public meeting, whether we did the proper notice or what have you, they wouldn't look at that. Now, they're going to look at all. So this legislation expands their jurisdiction, and it's now over all public meetings issues. And now, they gave us some more work. So if someone has a problem with how you're holding a public meeting, they get to file a grievance with us. And then we have 21 days to acknowledge that grievance and respond to it. And the response can be, oops, you're right, we did something wrong, we'll correct it in the future. Or it can be, no, you're bogus. We did everything right, and there was nothing wrong. And then we have to send that response to the Government Ethics Commission. New subject. We're rolling.
You're doing well.
A little bit worried about whether my voice would hold out. Snowstorm. All right, public records. On to public records. What is a public record? A public record, and this is right out of the statute. Any writing that contains public business information that is prepared, owned, used, or retained by a public body, regardless of physical form or characteristic. And again, I think I've talked about this before, but this is a 1970s law. And so when they were talking about physical form or characteristic, they were talking about notepad paper versus lined paper versus fax paper. But now we apply it to everything that we've got today. And so it's text messages, it's emails, electronic communication, letter communication, regardless of physical form. And so if it relates to public business, then it's a public record. And the public records law is not a confidentiality law, it's a disclosure law. So the default is that things must be disclosed unless we can find an exemption. And then even if we find an exemption, sometimes there is the overriding public purpose. And so sometimes a court will say, well, that document is so important and so integral to the public discourse on that subject that even though it's exempt, we're going to require you to disclose it. So an example of that is we've seen sometimes personal discipline matters are exempt, but if it relates to your police chief, and it has to do with whether that police chief rightly or wrongly discharged their firearm or something like that, and the whole community is really interested on whether their police chief is gun happy or not, even though we could make the argument that it is exempt, a court would likely say, well, no, that's pretty important for the public to know. The top law enforcement officer in the city, we should know what's going on. That's just an example of a public interest in a particular exempt document. This is where I tell you if you get an email from Grace, you need to have that be a priority for you in your daily living. So Grace is the records custodian for the city, and she's in charge of responding to public records requests. And sometimes those requests ask for something that you might have in your possession. Maybe it's the notes on your agenda and someone made a records request for that. Well, it's Grace's job to respond to that request, and she's on some pretty tight timelines. And so you really need to work with her in responding to that and helping her out. I've seen this slide before. These are my practical tips for dealing with public records as a city councilor. And this is not the law. This is my best practice. These are my tips for how to govern your own creation of public records and handling of public records. Use a city email for city business. And use a private email for private business. Keep those separated. That's the biggest takeaway here. And I know it can be awkward. People know you as a city councilor, they know you as the mayor, but they only have your private email, and so they say, oh, look what's coming up on the agenda. Next time around, I'm going to email the mayor, let him know what I think, and I'll send it to his private email address. Well, the best way to deal with that is to forward that to your city email address and let the person know, hey, here's my city email address. Since this is city business, I'm forwarding it to my city email address, and I will respond from my city email address. And so try to keep that dividing line as clear as possible. And the reason for that is if we ever get hauled into court someday and someone wants to look through your private email, I can stand up and say, we don't conduct city business on private email. And if you can truthfully hold your hand in the air and one on the Bible and say, yes, Your Honor, that's true. I don't use city email, or I don't use my private email for city business, then there's no need to go looking. My third bullet point there, avoid texting for city business. That is mostly just a records retention issue. It's just a pain to hold on to text messages. And this is mostly for staff. It's advisable not to conduct city business on via text because you gotta keep them. And then we probably gotta buy some software that keeps them for us for the right amount of time. And again, I think this is for you all as counselors, this is good. Again, this is the dividing line between, this is my private phone, this is my private number, I'm not using it for city business. And so try not to, and encourage all your friends not to text you about city business.
Just a real-time example of that happening is the issue with Val Hoyle and her text messages. I thought that was interesting. And that's costing her an attorney to fight, so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, good, very good example. And it's come up in the city of Portland. Text messages go missing, and sometimes it really is. It's just your phone archiving messages. You're not deleting them, but it's just been so long that maybe they archive every 3 months or 6 months. That is destroying that record.
Through the ice storm, the only thing that worked was texting.
Yeah.
So we texted.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't really care if somebody wants to look at my doctor's appointment schedule and things like that, because it was more important to get the information out than it was to protect my privacy. So we texted.
Yeah,
A lot.
Yeah.
Every day.
No,
Yeah.
I get it. Not the law. my best practices, my tips. Yeah, and bigger cities. It's. I mean, this is again 1970s law. We're trying to apply it to today, and so it's certainly a hassle. And bigger cities are spending a lot of money on software systems that act like a server and pull those text messages out and keep them. So they're off of your phone, they're in some cloud somewhere, and that's a service they're paying for.
I think we have that. We do have that, and we use it for social media, but we'll need to make sure that the texting gets on there as well.
What do we use for social media?
We have a recording for creating public records out of whatever we post to social media.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, anything that's on the city's social media accounts is a public record.
So are public records kept indefinitely, or is there a schedule for that?
There is a schedule. Yep, there's a records retention schedule. Sometimes it's indefinite. So records related to ordinance. I think we have to keep our ordinances, for instance, forever.
Go ahead.
But for correspondence, it actually relates. And there's no. The problem with our records retention schedule is it's by subject matter, not by item. So you can't treat all text messages the same. It depends on what they are regarding. So if you have a text message about the Public Works treatment plant, that is a Public Works issue. But if you have a text message about an ordinance, that is an ordinance issue. So it's a big hassle.
So back to the social media thing, I didn't know that it's always being recorded. So if the City of Creswell Facebook page is responding to a thread in a community group that is not the City of Creswell's community group, is that a public record?
If it has to do with city business, it does. It probably is.
Okay, that's interesting.
So if they were all texting during the ice storm and some of it was city business, some of it wasn't, ultimately, were they breaking the law unless somebody wanted to sue?
No, no,
Okay.
yeah, good question. Yeah, that is not a violation of the law.
It's more of if something slipped out and somebody wanted to sue, they could ask for those.
Yeah,
Subpoena those text messages, and then if something was said, then it'd be bad. But ultimately, if nothing was said that was a big deal in a lawsuit or not, it doesn't really matter, right?
Right,
I mean,
right, yeah.
let's not get too crazy. It's-
Yep, absolutely. And I would still argue that in a future lawsuit, only city business texts are relevant. And so I would still argue to segregate. I would want to keep private emails, private text, private.
Yeah.
It just makes my job a little bit harder. Does it work?
Just a comment on, during the ice storm, half the time you could only get text to somebody else. You couldn't get a voicemail, you could not get an email or anything else. And so
Yeah, yep.
when everything goes to hell and gone with the systems, sometimes text is the only way you can get through.
Question. For text messaging, is screenshots a record that would be compliant with this?
Oh, that's a good question.
Could we just screenshot them and then store the images? Or do we need the original?
Well, the issue of metadata, then, so I believe that metadata is part of the electronic record, and a screenshot does not always record that. So especially nowadays, I mean, with my phone, I have to drag to the side to actually get the time of when a text is sent, and so a screenshot of that would not even record the time. Yeah, nice try though.
Shelley?
Oh, I was just gonna request, before we move to ethics, can we take like a 10-minute break, so in case anyone needs to use the facilities?
5
Why don't you-
minutes?
Or 5 minutes? Yep.
It's not my meeting, Mayor.
Yeah. Why don't you just hop up and run?
It's me, not her, and I thought that I would ask for everyone.
Does anybody else need to go?
Now that everyone knows I do.
Let's keep going, because we have it here, and we've been through it, and I'll bet Shelley will pick right back up.
All right, new subject, ethics. These are my 3 rules for public officials. And just to remind you all, you are all public officials. A public official includes all elected officials, all appointed officials, so your planning commissioners, all employees, and city volunteers. We're also concerned about relatives of public officials. So we're talking about your spouse, your children, your brother, sister, parents, step-parents, in-laws.
So volunteer means this applies to everybody who serves on any committee for the city.
Right,
Okay.
yep. So it's the public official and their relative. A lot of these rules, as we will talk about, govern the conduct of the public official and the public official's relatives. And so relative is a defined term, and this is the extent of the defined term. So it's broad, but it's not all encompassing. So we don't have to worry about our cousins, but we do have to worry about a lot of direct relatives and in-laws. We also have to worry about, we have to worry about the public official, which is you. We have to worry about your relatives, which is the defined term, and we also have to worry about businesses with which you are associated. And this is another defined term. And basically, it is if you work for a business, own a business, receive income from a business, own a whole bunch of stock, $100,000 or more in a business, then that is a business with which you are associated. last one there is if more than 10% of your total annual household income comes from that business, derivatives or distributions or something like that, then that is a business with which you are associated. All right, rule number 1, don't use your position for personal gain. This is what we call the but-for test. The but-for test. A public official cannot use their position to get money or avoid losing money for the public official or a relative of the public official if that opportunity would not be available but for your position. So it includes getting money, but it also includes saving money. So a pretty classic example after this last week, Public Works has some chainsaws. And I had great need for a chainsaw. And so I go over to Cliff and I say, hey, Cliff, can I borrow the chainsaw? And he says, well, we're using them today, but maybe if you come in tonight, you can borrow it overnight and then bring it back in the morning. You are saving yourself having to go rent a chainsaw or buy a chainsaw. And the only reason that you get to that privilege is because Cliff knows you as a city councilor. So, but for your position on the council, you would not get that chainsaw. And you return it full of gas, and so it actually is no harm on the city. You sharpen the blade, return it full of gas. It works great for Cliff the next day. No harm to him. He was happy to let you have it, but it saved you money, and so that is a but-for problem.
What if you're an ex-city council person getting favors? Does that matter?
Well, so that would be a definition of public official. A public official is a current employee, current volunteer, current elected official. And so if that person no longer meets any of those standards, then they're not a public official.
Okay.
So this does not include compensation or reimbursement. So the big example here is you get reimbursed for travel to Salem to go to the LOC conference. The only reason you're getting reimbursed there is because you're on the city council attending this training, but you're just getting reimbursed the IRS mileage rate, and that's not a problem. Rule number 2, gifts are limited to $50 per year per giver. So we have to first know what a gift is. If gifts are limited, what is a gift? A gift is something of economic value given to the public official or the public official's relative without receiving value back, not given to the general public on the same terms. So this is the free soda, only given to city councilors. So if you come into Dairy Mart, you'll get a free soda every time you want one, but it's only for city councilors. So that is something of economic value given to the public official without paying for it, and it's not given to the general public on those same terms. So that is a gift. What is the gift rule? So once we define whether it's a gift or not, we then look to see if it's a problem under the rule. So you or your relative can ask for or receive gifts over $50 from any single source in 1 year if, 4 is the big one, if your source has an interest in your official actions. And as a city council, your official actions are basically your vote. So if they have an interest in ordinance or a resolution that's up before the city council, then they could have an interest in your vote, and you have to start worrying about the gift rule. In the soda example, Dairy Mart does not have an interest in front of the city council. And so even if you get a whole bunch of soda over $50 in a year, Dairy Mart's never in front of the city council and doesn't have an interest in what you're voting on. And so it is not a violation of the gift rule, even though it might be a gift.
What if it's something of general consumption, like they are against the tough fee, and it's coming up before city council for a vote? That will directly impact their business.
Yeah, so you just shot a hole in my hypothetical.
I thought of that actually when he was saying that. It's funny.
Nice job, Michelle.
Sorry.
No, that's the kind of thinking you have to do. Exactly right. Yes. Does this person who's giving me something for free have an interest in my vote? And maybe they do. And so that's the analysis you have to think through. Yep.
What if, retroactively, what if something comes up and you did not foresee that happening, and now you realize you've had $60 worth of smoothies from Dairy Mart?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's when the gift is given. Yeah.
What if you're a well-liked guy and you got 100 different people, but it's all $40?
Yeah, then it's not a violation of the rule.
Okay, so if I got 100 different people and it's $55, as long as it's $50, and say I got 1,000 people that want to give me, they treat it just like donations?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but, if that complaint comes, we have to think about evidence. And so what is the best evidence to refute that complaint? Maybe you have 1,000 people who really love you, but you have one person in town who really doesn't.
Yeah.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes, right, though? So you get that complaint, and now the Ethics Commission is asking, well, show me the records that all of this is under $50.
And that's kind of the question I was getting at, is that $50 is what they're focused on, not if I had, if you did find 500 people or 1,000 people, were giving you $50. They're more focused on $50, not the amount of people that might give you $50.
Right, yeah, yeah. Unless they're somehow working together.
Okay.
It was, a political action campaign, campaigners, people who are underground supporters of the city council. Yeah, good question. It is not a gift, and it's exempt from the gift rule if it's a campaign contribution. Interestingly, these rules are drafted by the legislature, so they made a big exception. So campaign contributions are not gifts. Presents from your relatives are not gifts. Well, they are gifts, but they're not a violation of the rule. So you can receive something of value from your children, your spouse, and it's not a problem, even if they have an interest in your vote. So even if your spouse is the owner of the Dairy Mart, who really doesn't like the tough, really is interested in you not voting in favor of it, that is not a problem if they give you an anniversary gift. Unsolicited tokens with a resale value of less than $25. So that's the cheap award type thing. So someone gives you an award, and the way I usually look at it with the resale value is, what is the resale value of a plaque that says Ross Williamson on it? I can tell you it's not going to be, no one's going to pay $25 for a plaque that says Ross Williamson on it, even if it's a really nice plaque. And they may be paid $200 for it. The resale value is almost always going to be less than $25.
I'm going to assume that a scholarship is the same as a discounted registration.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. These are more exemptions that were drafted by the legislature. So incidental food and entertainment. So if you go to an event and there is bad food and bad entertainment, that's incidental to the event overall. We don't have to worry about how much that event, how much that entertainment cost, or whether that person had an interest in me, I can go to the event. Now, if it's good entertainment, that could be a problem. And so, back in the day when the city of Eugene was trying to host the Olympic trials, and Tracktown USA said, city councilors, you can have all the tickets you want to come to the Olympic trials. Well, those things were pricey, and going to the Olympic trials was the whole point. That entertainment was the whole point of going to Hayward Field. And so that wasn't incidental. And so the council had to refuse those gifts because Tracktown USA had an interest in the city council decisions about how to spruce Eugene up and make it good for visitors. Rule number 3, confront your conflicts of interest. And this is where we talk about the difference between an actual conflict, something will happen, versus a potential conflict, something could happen. And the benefit here, I've told you before, is that the Government Ethics Commission takes a very strict definition of actual will happen. So it's a near certainty. If something is certain to happen, then it's an actual conflict, it's a will. But if it's not certain, everything else falls into the potential. And so, what is an actual conflict? An actual conflict is an action, decision, or recommendation, so your vote, by a public official that will result in a financial benefit to you or your relative or a business with which you are associated. So if you're taking a vote and it will with a certainty impact your relative or your business, that is an actual conflict.
Same with employee?
No, and unless you're your employee?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Unless your employee is also a relative. A potential conflict, an action, decision, or recommendation by a public official. So you as a city councilor are voting on something that could result in a financial benefit to yourself, your relative, or your business. That is a potential conflict. All right, so example time. Say City Hall needs a new roof. And so staff come before the city council and say, we need to budget next year for a new roof. Well, it just so happens that your brother is the primo roofer in town. And does a great job. Your brother is known throughout the Willamette Valley as being the primo City Hall roofer. And so you are being asked by your staff to budget for roofing. Well, budgeting for roofing is one thing. Whether your brother will actually get that work is not known. I mean, it's a good chance. I mean, it might even be a great chance because your brother is so good at roofing and does it at such a great price. But we don't know for certain that your brother will get that job. And you don't have to, staff doesn't need to spend the money either. You're just budgeting for it. And so that's a potential conflict. This decision could benefit your brother, but we don't know. And so you would declare a potential conflict. Well, a couple months down the road, we have the staff has gone through the process of bidding for the work, and lo and behold, your brother is top 3. And so staff bring forward the top 3 candidates for roofing, and they're asking you to pick the best one for the job. And so now we have your brother and 2 other contractors on the list, and they're asking for your vote on which one is going to get the job. So you're either going to vote for your brother, which is a financial benefit, or you're going to vote against your brother, which is a financial detriment. So this will be a financial hit or benefit to your brother, how you vote. And so that is an actual conflict. All right, what do you do if you're confronted with that decision, with a potential or an actual? Well, first thing you do is you state the nature of your conflict. And it's not just standing up and say, I have a conflict, and then sitting down. No, you have to describe the nature of the conflict. So you would say, my brother is a great roofer in town. I think we all know that my brother is the primo roofer in town, and we're budgeting for a roofing job. And so I'm declaring a potential conflict because my brother could get that job. And you do it before you start discussing. So at the very beginning of the agenda item, you declare that. And you do it so Grace gets it on the microphone, so it's on the record, so there's evidence. And you do it at each meeting. So if you do it at the budget committee meeting, you do it at the work session meeting, and then you do it at the council meeting. So you do it at each meeting, you do that. And for an actual conflict, you do all of those steps. You state the nature of the conflict. You do it on the record, and you do it at each agenda item, or at the beginning of the agenda item, and at each meeting. And then you do not participate if it's an actual conflict. So that's second question. We have 3 finalists. Your brother is one of the 3 finalists. I'm going to announce an actual conflict, and then I'm not going to participate. But for the first question, the budget question, for the potential conflict, I'm going to announce the potential conflict, and then I'm going to participate just like normal. I get to vote, I get to deliberate, I get to talk about how roofing is important, how I really support this budget line item, participate fully. All right, it is not a conflict. And I think the big one here, if you're a member of a large class, so if as city council you make recommendations and vote on water rates, you all pay water rates, but you are in the class of everyone else who pays water rates. So that is okay. The Ethics Commission has said above certain numbers, we don't have to worry about it. But if there's something in the gray area, then we actually have to submit that question to the Ethics Commission, and they're going to rule on it, whether that class is big enough or not. The other big exception is if you are on the board of a nonprofit, say you're on the board for Habitat for Humanity, and you as a city councilor are making a decision about whether to sell property, city owns some property that we're not using, we're going to sell it to Habitat, and they're going to build a house. You were on the board for Habitat, you would love to have that property, but by statute, that's not a conflict, and so you don't have to raise a conflict there. That's the end of it.
Questions? Items we covered? That was good.
Yeah?
Yeah. He's getting really good at this, isn't he? Okay. Thank you very much, Ross.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we will take a break now for anybody who needs to go, and then we'll come back to our last item on the agenda.
To take one then?
Absolutely.
Oh, let me show you that.
The
The meeting thing.
Yeah, if we have a few minutes, yeah.
Yeah, I'll show you what I responded to, because it pulled up on my
Okay,
thing.
yeah, I was looking for the second email, I sure didn't.
You never replied to it.
I did.
Well, you
First-
didn't do
first
I
one-
didn't get the first one.
The first
I
one that
didn't
said
have-
the AMs,
I didn't see that one. So I didn't have internet access until the Tuesday, until last Tuesday. So I missed the whole, oh my gosh.
Well, I don't even really, I just need to know what's good for you guys. 'cause
Well, I
I'll-
think we came up with it,
Oh, great.
but I don't know. It depends on Shelby. These are the ones that the three of us aligned on. It was the 31st and the 1st.
Yep.
So, but I don't know if Michelle's had a chance to, I don't know if we want to do 2 days in a row or what the deal is.
It'll only take one meeting
You
and
think?
it'll be
I
pretty
may be
quick.
bringing new stuff to the table, so.
Okay. Well, we're only addressing the charge. That's all we're meeting for.
Which is,
How we're gonna do the evaluation.
right, okay, so
Basically set
it
the-
probably will only take one meeting, but I am bringing new
Sure,
stuff to
okay,
the
that's
table.
fine, yeah, that's fine, okay, okay.
Just that idea, because once I've gone through the process, I'm like, okay, now I have ideas.
And that's 5:30 to 6:30, okay, so.
If Michelle, I don't know. She said she didn't see my response, so,
And this is you. That's you.
yeah, that's me.
Okay, and then I'm not even on there.
Yeah, because I think you just didn't reply to this
Best
one.
thing about leadership is getting.
Yeah, I know, and I didn't see, I missed the water rate advisory, all that correspondence, I wasn't even on, I wasn't connected.
Oh, sure. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry that you.
Show that to her, see if it doesn't work. You know, let's say, I'm sure she wouldn't have posted that since there was already somebody else meeting, so. Does that work for you? Well,
It does, as long as if that is enough time to get it properly noticed.
yes, that's a good question.
Oh,
Yeah, what do we need,
That's
like?
Friday?
I was waiting. Yeah, well, I mean, the first is Thursday.
So the first would be this Thursday.
How many days is it?
I'll send out something out.
Well, I should be good on this calendar.
And then there's always a.
I don't know, we'll have to ask Michelle.
Michelle,
Yeah, and,
are you going to use the facilities?
This is that last one that you corrected the times on.
Yeah.
Are you good with these dates? And she was wondering about notification, like if we do Thursday the 1st, is that enough time to get notice? Yeah. What about Wednesday? Probably not, it's Monday night.
Grace is a miracle worker.
I know, and we also have,
It's not a city council meeting, so it doesn't have the same timing. It's just a committee meeting.
Well, I'll let you guys decide. I'm good.
You're good with either one, and I'm good with either one as well.
I can also do,
it's just
do we have,
well, I know.
Want to do the safe side and do the first?
Do it first.
Okay, yeah, all
Okay,
right.
the first it is.
Done, all right.
5:30.
Okay, first at 5:30.
All right.
Then we're gonna be bringing
Meeting.
discussion to February's,
Get that
Okay, are we
bracelet.
ready?
Thank you.
I forget what the name was.
Okay, yeah. I did, yeah, I went, I just, it's just the way it was. I always do that. I had some other challenges. At the same time, it's all that, so it's just a really challenging.
Yeah, tonight's is just.
Take one down.
I feel so bad.
And the unhosted advisory committee, which is a potential for.
But I did have the perfect storm of things happen all at once. I have it
So this
when the first few
resolution.
days I was Oh, it was so fun, I have to tell you. Not knowing that it was that.
I'm Jim Rogers.
Oh, well. I only have 2 copies left, so here we go. It's our next item. Okay, are we ready? Okay, we're going to continue with the last item, discussion item, creating an ad hoc unhoused advisory committee. So I'm reading from our governing rules, page 9. This is section 10 under committee. 10.1 says, the mayor with consent of the council may establish by resolution ad hoc or standing committees to perform specified investigatory or advisory function. Any authority granted to such committee shall be clearly delegated in the form of charges in the resolution creating the committee. So what you have before you is a draft resolution providing for the appointment and duties of an unhoused advisory ad hoc committee. So this comes out of a couple of different emails I've received from members of the community over the last several months. Some council interaction, conversations I've had with Manager Amber and Council President Castillo. And so I put together a draft for discussion tonight because ad hoc committees require consent of council. So before we get into the draft, as I was putting this together, I read the State of the City speech from Mayor Sullivan in Cottage Grove. And she made a statement that they were going to be holding a listening session, inviting members of the community, the unhoused, to come in and just talk to the council. And as I've thought about this, I thought, well, do we begin with a listening session where we invite members of the community, members of our unhoused community to come in and talk with us about needs, concerns? Do we begin with an ad hoc committee? And I don't really know. And so I'm looking for all your input tonight. The draft, you haven't seen it before because I just fine-tuned it over the weekend. So this is a draft. Let me just read the draft so everybody can hear it, okay? Whereas the City Council recognizes the members of our community that are unhoused, and whereas the City Council adopted ordinance number 557 in 2023, updating the Creswell Municipal Code relating to camping and parking, and whereas ordinance number 557 acknowledges the need to address health and safety concerns for both the traveling public and individuals residing or camping within the city, promote a safe environment, limit unsanitary conditions, allocate limited public resources effectively, and meet legal and humanitarian standards for all people within the city. And whereas the mayor, with the consent of the council, may establish by resolution ad hoc committees to perform specified investigatory or advisory functions, now therefore be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Creswell, Oregon, that, number one, there is hereby created the Creswell Unhoused Advisory Ad Hoc Committee with a charge and timeline given by the mayor. Number two, the members of the committee shall consist of 3 city councilors, those serving on the Public Safety Committee, 3 residents, of which at least 1 shall be a member of the unhoused community, and 1 non-resident. The committee will be supported by city staff members as designated by the city manager. The committee shall be governed by all state and local public meetings, rules, and laws. Number 3, attachment A, listing members of the committee, the mayor's charge and timeline, and other information about the committee is hereby approved as part of this resolution. Then on the back side, page 2, goal: to listen to the unhoused members of our community and their health and safety concerns, to promote a safe environment for overnight sleeping within the city limits, where allowed, to limit unsanitary conditions, to allocate limited public resources effectively, and to meet legal and humanitarian standards for all people within the city. Charge: at the first meeting, select the chair and secretary. The chair will notify city recorder of all meeting dates and times. The secretary will keep minutes of all meetings and submit them to the city recorder. B, review ordinance number 557, an ordinance updating the Creswell Municipal Code relating to camping and parking. Committee members may wish to take a tour of locations where overnight camping is permitted. C, receive a report from staff on the current status of unhoused camping in Creswell. D, listen to concerns expressed by unhoused and housed committee members related to health, safety, and sanitation of unhoused community members sleeping on city property. F, explore ways to create a safe and sanitary environment for all citizens on city property where overnight sleeping is allowed. G, present recommendations to the City Council. Committee members, Councilors Nicholas Smith, Norma Jean Osborne, Clark Kent, residents, 3 blank spaces, non-residents, 1 blank space, city manager Amber, Sergeant Speldrich, and additional staff as assigned. Timeline, chair of the committee to bring an update to the city council at the date unspecified work session. Full committee to attend and present recommendations to the city council at the date unspecified work session. So this is a draft. And now the floor is open for council discussion. Councilor Stacy.
I have lots. I'm going to start with, I don't understand the need for a non-resident on this committee. And then I'm going to just go full into, I'm 1,000% against having an ad hoc committee for homelessness in Creswell. We're a town of 5,700 people. I am not about to ask my constituents to start picking up homeless services in this town, because what happens is you develop these committees, you start providing services, and then the population grows. We've seen that in Cottage Grove is a prime example of that, where they're having to find now a third park to house their homeless because so many people go to Cottage Grove now because they know the services are there. Cottage Grove at least has a DHS. They have services in their community. We do not. It would cost our community members a lot of money to provide services down the road for the unhoused here. And I'm not about to open the door and start asking them for that money right now. And I think that they were very clear when they thought a park was going to be designated that they're opposed to this kind of action.
Okay. Other councilors, thoughts, input? Nick?
I expand on what Stacy just said. We've already proven the point the citizens of Creswell don't want that. I thought we already kind of decided that we had a park to go to, but it wasn't something that we're going to just televise or advertise. And I think using citizens' money, taxpayer money for that goes against everything we just fought for last year. I feel like I literally I'm flush with a little bit of confusion and frustration that we worked so hard last year to be done with this, and now we're kind of back to it. So no, I don't have any time for this.
Okay. Other councilors, Shelley?
Sure, so I know this was something that I had also emailed you as a potential idea. I think as we were listening to our community over the course of the last year, I think that we had some very vocal members of our community who came to our committee, or came to our meetings and shared their thoughts. We also had some other perspectives out there that I think that you should listen to as well. You know, I think, you know, Bill Kent was someone who came and shared perspectives, and I think has been consistently here and to talk about the community and his experiences, talking with unhoused individuals that live within Creswell, talking about needs, right? I guess I won't speak for all of us. I know that I've learned a lot from his wisdom and perspective and the experiences that he's had in connecting with our unhoused population. I think that we've received emails from members of our community that talk about, you know, needs for our unhoused residents. I think I'm reflecting on an email that we received in December that talked about, you know, just kind of the porta potty, right, that is consistently cleaned and maintained. That's in our pocket park, just right across the street. The ability potentially to charge a cell phone or to charge something. Right. I think about those other things that our community members have said that they would like more exploration around. And so I know I am supportive of listening to all of our community and listening to their needs. And I think we need to explore, or that we could explore, what else our community may need.
Okay. I want to make sure every counselor is able to speak. So, who'd like to go next?
I'm not sure that I look at this as rehashing the past and trying to give them more places to stay and more thing, and more stuff. It would be helpful for us to understand what they're dealing with. I think having a bathroom in the porta potties to use, and maybe even having a place where they can charge their devices. I don't think we're under any obligation to provide any other services to unhoused people. And if we're looking at doing something along that line, I'm okay with having this ad hoc committee to see how we can solve those type of problems.
If I could just add one thing to Councilor Osborne's list that I know that they would like is water. And that is a considerable investment. So I know that will come up because they have no place to get water.
Okay. Clark or Councilor Castillo?
Well, my concern is that we're going to tear off the bandage that we put on when we were in July. Where was it in July when HB 3115 came into effect? I mean, clearly, my impression was that the community's vision for supporting the unhoused was not there. It's not there. And I see in the goal here, I mean, I am totally open to listening to the unhoused members of our community. And then it says down here, to allocate limited public resources effectively. We are already allocating some very limited public resources like that porta potty out there. I mean, we complied with everything that we had to legally. And I even see I think that our officers of the city has been pretty lenient with what's going on over there at the park. And then to review the ordinance, number 557, an ordinance updating the Creswell Municipal Code. I'm not exactly sure, what do we mean by updating? I mean, we just passed
This
that,
is the title of 557.
which is the ordinance.
Yeah, that's the
correct?
title. So I simply wrote it to review the ordinance, and the title is right here. So I'm not adding anything, I'm just
Okay,
saying,
but-
we're reviewing this ordinance, which is titled as such.
Okay, but they're charged with reviewing the ordinance,
Not updating it.
updating the
Not-
Creswell
not-
Municipal
They're not charged with
Code.
updating, they're charged with reviewing this ordinance, which is titled this.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's the
okay.
title of the ordinance.
Got you, okay. So, and having a listening session before this goes into place, I think is a really good idea. I think that it's going to be controversial. I think it's going to, I mean, look at the crowd that we had. Come on, are we going to go down that path again?
No, I'm not.
Are we ready to do that?
I'm not.
I'm not looking forward to it, honestly. On this, I think if we moved forward with this and just said, let's do it, it's going to be very controversial. I think that having a listening session may make it a little softer. It may be useful as an educational component, part of this, if it was to happen, to get the word out, to listen, I don't know. Definitely, I would be in favor of a listening session prior to this, because it is, in my mind, it is very similar when we went down, I don't know if anybody was here, when we went down the road of the Equity Inclusion Committee, that was just, boom, it was gonna come right out of the blue. And we had no educational component to that whatsoever. It was just like, we're gonna turn the switch on and we're gonna do it. So, to speak to the listening session, I think it would be helpful if the council was to decide to do that. Like I said, I don't think this is gonna end well. And, but I'm certainly listening, I'm willing to listen to anybody in the community and what their situation is and what their problems are. Doesn't mean that I'm gonna have an answer for them, but I'm certainly willing to listen. And that's the goal. The first sentence is to listen to the unhoused members of our community. And I do have a couple reservations too about a non-resident being part of this committee. I think that you need to be vested, truly vested in a citizen of the community of Creswell to be part of something like this. That's just my opinion. That's about all I have.
Okay, Clark?
I am also interested in listening to the unhoused members of the community, to all members of our community, whether they're housed or not. And doing what we can for the people of Creswell. I know we don't have, the limited public resources is a big thing. I know we can't offer a lot of services, but I don't know, I don't see why we can't look at this and this is a real thing that's happening, and I just don't know where to go from here. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to make some comments first. I'm going to open up to members of the public who would like to speak, then we'll wrap it back around to the council.
So it'd be nice if we could actually finish our discussions. You can
I'm
gavel me
sorry.
all you want, but you like to squelch me. I would like to follow up
Excuse
on
me.
something that he said,
Our
but now
point
what
of
you're gonna
rule
do
that
is you're gonna
every
put an
counselor-
hour-long break
excuse
between me and that.
Our point of order is that every counselor has a chance to
I
speak
gotcha.
first, and I have not spoken yet. Second one of the rules is that the mayor sets agendas, so I do have a little bit of discretion here. We will wrap back around to the council. We will have a continued robust discussion.
It's hard to continue a
Excuse me,
conversation when you
you are
break it up into
interrupting.
pieces. That's all I'm
Excuse
trying
me,
to say.
You're interrupting.
I am.
Yes, you are. So a couple of notes. The third whereas is taken directly from the ordinance. So ordinance 557, the fifth paragraph of the ordinance 557 states, whereas this ordinance is intended to address health and safety concerns of both the traveling public and individuals residing or camping within the city, promote a safe environment, limit unsanitary conditions, allocate limited public resources effectively, and meet legal and humanitarian standards for all people within the city. So in drafting this, I took from the ordinance what the ordinance itself said it was supposed to do. So as I listened to members of the community last fall, the question was, how do we do this? We passed the ordinance, we said we're going to do this. How do we address health and safety concerns? How do we promote a safe environment? How do we limit unsanitary conditions? How do we allocate these resources? How do we meet legal and humanitarian standards? Our ordinance says that's what it was created to do. So I think one of the questions that has come up as we determined in the ordinance where it could happen, where it could not happen, it is happening in the one spot that was allowed. But questions have been raised that relate to our ordinance. So the purpose of such an ad hoc would be to address the ordinance, which is why the ordinance needs to be reviewed. It's kind of like any committee that is formed, the first thing they do is review their enacting ordinance. This is the enacting ordinance that we created. So that's why if a committee is formed, their first job is to review the enacting ordinance. And so that's why it's stated here. In terms of the question, Stacy, that you asked about non-resident, the reason that's here is most of our committees do allow for a non-resident. The Water Advisory Committee, the Parks Board, Airport, its users. Most of our committees, with the exception of planning, even the Planning Commission has non-residents, with the exception of the Budget Committee. Most, if not all, but most, do allow for a non-resident voice. And the purpose behind that, I think, is that we have non-residents who have businesses, pay water rates, for example, utilize our parks, deeply invested in Creswell, but they live outside the boundaries. So we've tried to allow for different committees that they can have a voice that way. So that's why the non-residents on here. So I think those were a couple of questions. The purpose of this is to be a place, if you look at the charge, I try to be real specific on the verbs I use at the beginning of the charge. Select the chair and secretary. Review the ordinance, first job. Review the enacting ordinance. Receive a report from staff on the current status. So listen to concerns expressed by unhoused and housed committee members. In other words, the committee needs to listen to one another and then listen to concerns of the unhoused community members. So it's a listening place. It's a listening place. Then it's an exploring place to explore the ordinance. How do we create a safe and sanitary environment for all citizens? We have a piece of property, it's happening. How do we make sure that it's safe and sanitary for everybody who needs to use that location? We have streets here with vehicles parked there, that's part of the ordinance. How do we make sure it's safe and sanitary in that environment? And then present recommendations. Now, as with all committees, this is advisory in nature only. And my intention would be to make it short-term. So it would be a short-term committee that would get together, that would be a place of reviewing the ordinance, listening, seeing if there's things that need to happen to meet the ordinance, bringing recommendations to the council, and then in the end, the council makes decisions. So I give that by way of explanation as to what this ordinance is intended to convey. So I want to listen to members of the community who would like to speak, then we're going to wrap back around to the council and wrap up our discussion. So members of the community, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and tell us your name, and then you may speak to this.
I'm Jim Rodman. I just moved here about a year and a half ago from Eugene. And I moved from Eugene because it's the same problem that's going on right now. I go up and down the corridor of Seattle, Portland, Salem, Washington. I watch Kitty Pearson ruin parks in Eugene. They were trashed completely. They had to dig a foot and a half down and take needles out of the ground in the parks. And it was ruined. If you open it up to the public to come here and camp and stay, they're going to move in like nobody's business. If you give them more things, they're going to move in faster. You have to control it somehow. And it's not going to be, it's like I said, once they get in, they're going to come. If they have something that they can get, they're going to go for it and they're going to get it. I'm in agreement with her. I watch Cottage Grove. My daughter lives in Cottage Grove, and they're putting up homeless shelters all over the place. We end up with trash. You drive up 99, the road's littered. I'm an avid fisherman and stuff, and there's garbage all over. It's going into the river. They do not clean up their mess. I don't know what else I can say, but I'm in agreement with her and some of the committee members of saying that you've got to talk about it, and you've got to put a lot of limits on it, or you'll have them flooding in here. I hear word of McDonald's going in here and Taco Bell too. And that's going to bring more public here too. But I just came from a meeting tonight, trying to get some speed limit reduced on my street, and I'm glad to sit here and talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other members of the community. Okay, stand and tell us your name.
Debbie Yee. I would just like to say, I've been at all the meetings, and I'd like to address a little bit about what Councilor Clark said and the fact that you're open to listening. I think we all are. Some of us don't have the lived experience that maybe some of our unhoused citizens have, but you're saying that there were some that were against it, but many who were for it. I believe Mr. Kent was one of only maybe two that stood through this whole process of having 100 or more people here, and it built up with the fervor, basically, of people such as Mr. Rodman not wanting to open it up to the houses or unhoused, but still be sympathetic to it. And I really feel like in a town of 5,500 or 6,000 people or whatever, if what Sergeant Speldrich has said several times when asked, do we still have a lot of homeless? Are they still here? Are they rotating? And he sometimes says 6 to 8 in vehicles or tents or whatever, and a couple problem people. I think that setting a committee before you even listen to people is probably getting maybe a little bit ahead of it. But I really feel like for a town our size that has fewer people like this, why isn't that manageable enough, and why is it's like the few are controlling the majority? And I think you're absolutely right, that's perfectly said. You're gonna be ripping off a bandage, and you're gonna have a lot more people here. Not that that's a problem, I think you want your city to engage, but that's what's actually kept me at these meetings, was because now I'm figuring out lots of things are being said and done in council meetings and work sessions, and nobody knows about them, because maybe people aren't watching the feeds, or they're not engaging, and there might be a lot of people at home watching this, but I think more attention needs to be paid to what's going on in our city. We do want to be sympathetic. As I've shared before, I've had a person in my family be homeless. And so I have secondary lived experience to it, but it's not that we're not compassionate, but sometimes some of the stories that have been shared also may or may not be maybe other facts that are contributing factors to it. So I think this is premature to want to have another committee that a lot more people have to be involved in, that have to take their time in. You guys are like all super busy. I just don't know where you're gonna get more time, even if it's short term.
And I am compassionate.
Thank you. Hold on. Other members of the public who'd like to speak? Tell us your name, please.
Bill Kent.
Okay.
You wonder why there's a non-resident on there? I'm the sole non-resident that started coming to these meetings that basically cared about the homeless or the unhoused. And I would have thought that 2 weeks without power would have taught some of us who have houses that you just live in big tents. And a week or two without power might have given you some compassion to the people who don't have power. Now, you passed an ordinance in July. Listen, chance, let me have mine.
I'm just shaking my head,
Okay,
so
you
I'd
had-
say word.
You passed an ordinance in July about the park. Sounded good when daylight was 10 o'clock at night. This time of year, it's dark over there at 5 or 5:30. But in your ordinance, when you passed it, they couldn't do anything about a tent, a structure. They couldn't do anything. They really weren't even supposed to have a tent. So they couldn't do anything about the rain, the cold, or anything till 10 o'clock at night. I ask you, is that compassionate? Is that reasonable? That's the kind of re-examination. I'm not talking about running ads, come on down the street. We have people in Creswell that are Creswellians as much as you are or I am, and they don't have a warm, dry place to sleep. So in exploring, if we want to keep them in the park, fine. But maybe with the time of the year, with weather, you kind of rethink the timing issue. Maybe you rethink, oh, you know, if you had a neighbor that would never give water to his dog, you'd turn him in. The city doesn't give any water to the homeless. There's water at the fire department here, but they can't use that. They're told to go to the library. Can you imagine sending some of the people that you think are homeless over to the library because it's by the kids section to get water? So there's some basic considerations that the committee might look into and say, what about this? That's not going to get hordes of people from Eugene stomping down the freeway. We have people, whether we like it or not. You can be as inhumane or humane as you want, but those people aren't going to go away. They're just going to suffer. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, I'm only allowing one opportunity to speak from the public, so is there any other members of the public who'd like to speak? In the back. Tell us your name, please.
Kevin Prachu. So I actually would encourage the creation of the committee because I think if I could communicate a little bit through metaphor, we all just experienced the storm. And when the storm happened, lots of things happened to people that didn't happen before. Branches fell into yards, into streets, onto power lines, onto cable, all that kind of stuff. And I know that a lot of folks didn't know who to call, who to talk to, who to find out, where do I go to access that resource that I need right now. So sometimes even City Hall would get calls for, hey, my power's out. Well, that's not City Hall responsibility. We don't do the power down at City Hall. So the committee itself is a useful tool, in my mind, for helping to establish parameters and scope around what is the city's business in terms of helping and working with unhoused people versus what maybe other private organizations or people do. And so having that kind of I think that it was mentioned that we only have 6 to 8 people in Creswell. To me, that ought to maybe be the scope, is that we're trying to help those that call Creswell home and have lived here for a long time. So versus opening our doors to other people coming in that have no business in Creswell and have no ties to Creswell. That's scope. Scope helps us define those parameters for which, how far are we willing to go as a city to help out those that call Creswell their home versus, again, outside people and other kinds of scope that include services that we can't afford. So the committee can help with that. Listening session, great idea. Because that actually will help you as you're working to refine the charge and the timeline. Because after this listening session, you might go, whoa, we got more to think about than we thought. Maybe we ought to give a longer timeline or somehow refine the scope a little bit of what the charge is or something. So I think those listening sessions can help.
Okay, so we're back to the council. And again, I'd like everybody to speak once, and then we will move towards some kind of conclusion of this discussion. No decisions are made tonight. So council members.
I hesitate to raise my hand because I tend to be the only one that does a lot, and I tend to kind of get berated for that. So
You have the floor.
So, we already established how we're dealing with the unhoused, and we went through a lot of very difficult meetings to do that. Why we're bringing this up to do again, I have no idea. I have an idea, but I would also point out that Mr. Kent has been one of the loudest voices in our community over the last for 3 or 4 months, especially on social media, pushing this agenda. And it's the first I'm hearing that he's not even a member of our community, so that's interesting to me. We have 5,700 people in Creswell. We have 10 unhoused. We live in a democracy where we are, we kind of flow with the majority rules, the majority of people. That is nowhere, we're literally catering to the minority of people that are here. And again, my issue is you start a committee and then unhoused from everywhere, oh, well, Creswell has a committee, now they're gonna take care of us, let's go there. That's what happens. We've seen this happen, we know this happens. We have 2 listening sessions every month. 2 a month that any member of this community can come in here and talk to us in. Twice a month. It doesn't matter. So why do we have to have a special listening session? And then I did think about the unhoused when I was freezing cold in my home, and I was super thankful that I had 4 walls around me. I also thought about how I can't imagine how anybody could give up safety and security for drugs. I don't understand that. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. Other councilors.
I'm not ready yet.
You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but I want to make sure that every councilor has the opportunity to speak.
Let's go back to the public afterwards.
Nope. We're gonna wrap up with council.
Sure, like
Alonzo?
like I said, I'm always open to listen to our community, what they have to say. I will never say no to that. But I also, you only have to look down to Cottage Grove and see what has gone on down there and how it has divided that community, has divided that council, all because they had great intentions, they had a great idea, but ultimately, I mean, you just look what's happened over there. My biggest concern is that it's going to divide our community. It's going to get everyone all upset after they said, like Councilor Holt said, we just went through so many tough, long, grueling, painful meetings. And it kind of feels like, man, we finally got this behind us. Now, here we are. Do we want to go down that road again? It's basically is what we're going to do. We're just going to go down that same road again. I'm not looking forward to it. But I will listen. I will listen to anyone and everyone in this community. So that's it.
Norma?
I don't think we should have the ad hoc committee. Not at this time. We could revisit it 5 years down the road, and maybe there's a reason for it 5 years down the road. But I think we've already discussed everything. And I agree listening to the public. If the public want to come in and talk to us about what they're going through, they can come in to a meeting and talk about it for 3 minutes. And we'll listen to their concerns. And we may or may not decide to address any of those concerns. But we will definitely listen to the concerns.
That's Norma? Clark?
I think that a lot of people are probably one medical emergency away from being homeless. Just having inflation goes up, wages aren't keeping pace with that. If you have a support system to fall back on, that's fantastic. If I was homeless, I don't know if I would be a drug user or not. I don't know that all homeless are drug users, which seems to be an assumption here. Maybe the majority of them are. I just don't know. I need to know more about this, and I will look more on it because I want to be prepared. I don't think the number is going to go down as much as everybody wants to make sure they're all in Eugene or Cottage Grove or somewhere else. That's all.
Okay. Shelley?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that this is a topic that we've received a number of emails about. We've had a number of individuals come to our listening sessions about. I think that, speaking for me, I know that I have a lot to learn, right? And I want to learn from our community, the community that we were elected to represent. And so I'd like to know about what those who live in Creswell are experiencing. And I'd like to know, are they drug users, are they not drug users, right? What was their life experience that brought them to the position that they're in? I think Councilor Kent brings up a really good point about how, cost of medical, right? And how we may all be just very close, right, to that, because medical costs are, they as I have done continual research, is, one of the biggest drivers of debt, one of the biggest drivers of poverty. And so, I just think, how lucky are we, right, to be sitting in this position, and what it is that we can learn. I think that our community has shared, and I think that we've received a lot of feedback from our community but I think that we have more, I think that we have the opportunity to learn more so that we can best represent our needs and be proactive as a council as well. And so, so I am in favor of listening. I am in favor of an ad hoc committee. I don't read anything in here that this will be the absolute change or outcome. I think that, understanding, looking at that code is understanding like point B that quote, like the ordinance called updating the Creswell Municipal Code. I think that can be misleading if there's not quotes kind of around the name of the ordinance itself. But that helped me understand that we're looking at that code. That we're, I don't read anything in here that says that we must do something, that we must change anything, but I read in here that we are listening, that we are learning, and that there might be a recommendation for something that we can do to better serve our community. I don't think it's a mandate. So I would be in favor of listening and learning and seeing where our community is.
Yeah.
I have a lot of different feelings here. I'm gonna try not to bounce all over the place and try not to be redundant here, but, and I don't mean disrespect to anybody in the council or the city out there. These are my opinions and my opinions only. They're the opinions I believe, the people that I represent. And, the only voice that I've heard is Mr. Kemp's. I've seen some emails, but they're through somebody else. As Councilor Holt pointed out, our listening sessions have been twice a month. When we had, last year, when we went through the homeless discussion, I think we had 2 people that said they wanted us to do it, out of the 300 a night that came here. And so I go back to the minority. We're gonna put how much resources into the minority that is probably less than 0.5% of the residents of Creswell. I think that's foolish, just in a business standpoint, and I don't mean disrespect and foolish. I just think it's silly to put those resources in that avenue. With those 2 meetings a month, again, I haven't heard anybody else other than Mr. Kent. Not to say that they haven't been here, but I haven't heard from them. Why haven't they come here? Why haven't they discussed it with us? If that's their time, why haven't they discussed it with us? So I find that concerning. You can tell me that I'm not humane or I don't care about the homeless. You talk about the outages. I'm also grateful for the decisions that I've made to work my butt off, and make good decisions. And I'm not gonna apologize for that, and I shouldn't have to suffer for that, and I don't think anybody else should either. Not everybody who's homeless is a drug user, and maybe they have a medical issue that didn't allow them that, but there's also OHP that pays for everything. And when I had a child, I paid my own insurance. And when I went and paid for that child, to get the title on my child, I had to pay over $10,000 every time. And I had insurance, which I paid out of my own pocket. I know plenty of people that go have babies and use OHP and don't pay a darn thing. So there's options out there. I'm not gonna sit here and say that I'm the most kind person towards the homeless whatsoever. But there's options out there. There's also accountability. Dogs can't feed and water themselves. People can. You can choose to make a better decision for your life. And it might suck, and it might take a lot of work to get there, but you can do that if you want to, bad enough, period, end of story, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think personal accountability has been lost, and we need to get it back. And I absolutely have no time for this right now, at all. I don't think we should do that. I think we've been listening. We have continued to listen since then, and not one person has brought it up other than Mr. Kent. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but you're the only one I hear. And maybe you are the voice for the whole, and that's good. They should have somebody out there for them advocating. But if they can't advocate for themselves, then I'm darn sure not going to sit here and try and bestow upon them gifts of a charging station, which the citizens pay for. We already have a bathroom. It is sanitized. It is ADA applianced. The city is going through and doing everything they're supposed to do to follow the rules. I just don't see it. I feel like we've done everything in our power to do though. I don't think the citizens of Creswell, they have clearly spoken. This is a non-starter whatsoever, and Cottage Grove is a perfect example to look at and go, what not to do. Whatever they do, do the opposite of. Whatever Eugene does, do the opposite of, period. And personal accountability has got to be the theme of my comments tonight, period. You have to be personally accountable for yourselves. Because I can sit back in that storm and go, I got 3 young kids. man, I'm sure thankful that they mean enough to me to make the right decisions and to work extra, to work longer, to do whatever it took. Not everybody's blessed with certain opportunities, but everybody has an opportunity to better themselves, period. And this, we've already been doing this. We've been listening. I don't think there's any need for it. I don't think you're wrong to address that and bring that up by any means and use it for a platform to hear. But we've been doing that. I haven't heard anything other than congratulations and thank you for all the work that you do since we've as a committee and as a council have decided to move forward. I've heard a lot more thanks than anything else. So therefore, I feel like this is a complete waste of our resources.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question for Manager Amber. In drafting the resolution, the intent was to not undo the ordinance, but was to make sure that we're following the ordinance. Specifically, the statement I read, the fifth one down is here, the third statement on your draft. So my question to you is, ultimately, it's your job as the administrator to follow the ordinance, which is to address health and safety concerns, to promote a safe environment, to limit unsanitary conditions, to allocate limited public resources effectively, and to meet legal and humanitarian standards. The ordinance is our ordinance saying, here's what we're going to do, and because you're our administrator, manager, you do it. So my question is, are you able to address all those needs? Or is there value in having an ad hoc committee to look into the ordinance, look into what the needs might be, and then bring recommendations?
Well, I believe we provide a safe environment in that we provide for them the same law enforcement that we do the whole city. We limit unsanitary conditions by keeping the park clean and providing a bathroom that also has a hand sanitizer. We try to keep that loaded, but we've come to find out that people steal it and use it to light fires. But to the best of our ability, we keep that loaded up. Allocating limited public resources effectively, where we have staff time that's involved there, as well as the money for the upkeep of the park and the money for the bathroom. And I think we're allocating that all right. Meet legal and humanitarian standards for all people within the city. We meet the legal standards. We have a trash-free sanitary spot for them to rest at night, which is, I think, the intent of the city council. I can't address the humanitarian part.
Okay. So, if I were to ask the question, does the council give consent to this ad hoc committee? My guess is that it would be no, from what I'm hearing.
I think so.
Okay, so I want to make the statement because an ad hoc committee is created by the mayor, but with the consent of council. Creating this was not my impression, was not my desire to impose something on you don't want, which I couldn't do anyways. It was my intent to respond to some emails I've received, some comments I've heard, and I have to be very honest, a month ago, Mr. Kent came and spoke when we were reviewing 3 applicants for a vacant city council position. And Mr. Kent came and spoke and said, this is the largest issue Oregon's dealing with right now. And you encouraged us to appoint Ms. Allen. And in fact, the council did appoint Ms. Allen. And at least what I heard was to give her an opportunity to serve, but also we want a representation on our council from a member of the unhoused community. We wanted to hear from her. We wanted to better understand what it was like, what her needs were, how we as a city could be supportive of unhoused community members. And while Mr. Kent is not a citizen of Creswell, he's a member of our community, just as Bill Spencer is a member of our community who served so admirably to get a lot of us through this storm by coming in from several miles out of town to make sure that his gas station in Creswell was operational. He's not a citizen. He's a member of this community and has been for years. So I think there's value in our city council, in our city committees having non-citizens who are members of our community, who are active here, who love this community and want to have a voice. So I felt like I was responding somewhat to the council action a month ago, because today we would have Miss Allen on our council had it not been for a conflict of interest. And so my belief is that the council has most recently said we want to hear from our unhoused members. We value them. And the first statement here in the whereas is simply that the city council recognizes the members of our community that are unhoused. And while we only have 6 or 8, and whatever response we make has to be appropriate to that, and while I agree that I'm not wanting to attract the unhoused members of the state to come to Oregon, I think we have to recognize people. And we have to be, according to our own ordinance, we have to ask the question, are we doing what we said we do in our own ordinance? Which is why I asked Manager Amber, are you empowered? Can you do what this states? Is there a need for an ad hoc committee? If there's not, and from the sensing of the council, it's not something we should move forward with. And you've answered my question, except that you're not really able to address the humanitarian part.
We do, I sit on the board of community sharing, and community sharing does address some of the humanitarian issues that are in South Lane County. So our population does have access to things because we have bus passes. And there have been concerns that it takes too long to ride the bus down there to get services and then ride it back. But it is provided. I personally have worked to try and provide some humanitarian aid to some of these folks, and it doesn't work. So I'll just throw that out there as well.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, Councilman, if you want to make one more comment. I first want to ask the question, is there consent to create an ad hoc community, an ad hoc unhoused advisory committee, since that was the agenda item? Is there consent?
No?
Yes.
All right, so there is not consent. We will not be appointing an ad hoc advisory committee. I've heard some conversation about a listening session. My impression is that we're not really in support of a formal listening session. So let me ask that question. Are you in support of a formal listening session that we would put on the calendar? It wouldn't happen for a couple of months because we have a lot of stuff on the agenda, but it would happen maybe springtime. Are you interested in a formal listening session?
Can you clarify?
We would either wrap it into a work session and say that part of our agenda is to encourage people, get it out on our media, all of our stuff, to say this particular work session, one item on the agenda is to listen to concerns of our unhoused community.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, because were you saying a listening session just for them, or a listening session in general? Because then I would say, can we just do a town hall? But I get.
Well, we could do anything we wanted to do, but my first impression would be to put it into a non-busy work session as an agenda item, and to make sure we get the word out in advance so that people know there's going to be a spot in the agenda tonight for listening to concerns from our unhoused community members. Is there interest in that?
I say no due to the various options that they have now currently to voice their opinions.
Okay, Norma?
That is, maybe we could solicit information, let people know where we'd be willing to allow them to speak in a council meeting. And I think a town hall would be the same thing that we had with the homeless situation, the meetings of hundreds of people coming in here to fight against doing anything to help people.
Okay.
We ought to listen to them.
Clark?
I'm thinking the opportunity for in the public sessions right now might be enough, given the option at the time, and that if that was to change, maybe revisit that. So no,
Okay,
and not at the moment.
okay.
I know.
Yes.
Without the ad hoc committee moving forward, I just see no point in a specific listening session to address this. But however, I would totally encourage the community, as we've heard, that we have 2 a month, that anyone can come and we're here to listen. And I would just make one more comment and then I'll be done. The question that was asked to you, if you were empowered in these things you were doing, I just want to say that you were doing this before we even put this ordinance into place. I thought you were doing a pretty good job of allowing what was going on over there at the park. So, that's it.
The ordinance met a legal requirement of the state.
Which I felt Manager Ember was already doing that.
Okay, so I'm also hearing a no for a listening session inserted into a work session. So, with that, the final item on our agenda, we are adjourned.